Alrighty. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Today is May the 12th. It's a Monday today. As you can see, we have a pretty big gap up over the weekend. We talked about this on Friday. We had trade talks over the weekend, and we ended up cutting some tariffs or slashing some tariffs here on I was going to say SPY between US and China. So you can see pretty big gap up. We're about up 3% here on the ES overnight session, about 4% on the NQ. We're going to have to mark out some brand new levels here as well. So we'll look at that here in a second. A lot of things to kind of talk about with this gap up and a lot of charts to go over here as well. But before we do that, good morning. What's up, Daniel? What's up, Ryan, Sean, Juan? What's up, Wayne, Brett, Ray? What's up, Sid? What's up, JT? What's up, Josh, Bob? What's up, Darth, Monty? What's good, everyone? What's good, Benjamin, Patrick, Deuce, Damien, Mila, Katrina, Angel, Shayday? What's up, Van? What's up, EA? Antics, John, Kat, Zena, Co. What's up, Dominic, Jeff? Yeah, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Let's get right into exactly what we're looking for coming into today. So let's first actually go on to the weekly outlook. The weekly outlook that I did yesterday that I posted, I mentioned a lot of things can change over the weekend with this potential gap up. So we're going to have to kind of go over kind of a new game plan, mark out new levels here as well. As you can see, if we're looking at the key economic events coming into this week, what we do have in the markets for red folder, we have core CPI. This is going to be at Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Wednesday, we have an interesting time, but basically Fed speaking at 5 a.m. Thursday, we have core PPI, and then we have core retail sales, and then we also have Fed Chair Powell speaking also at a weird time, which is going to be at 8:40. So I'm not sure if this is going to overlap coming to market open, but we'll keep an eye out on Thursday, where there's going to be a lot of red folder news, and then Friday we have to keep an eye on consumer sentiment. This is going to be big. So far, it is red folder. I don't know why they just don't keep it red folder, but consumer sentiment, that's going to be at 10 a.m. on Friday. So as you can see, that's for at least the red folder news events. If we're talking about earnings, we still have some earnings for some names. Most of the big names already reported, but we still have a couple other names. Cisco, you have like Baba, Walmart. Not too much to look for, but maybe if you have long-term investments or if you're swing trading some of these smaller names, that's something to keep in mind. But let's go straight into the charts. There's a lot of things to kind of go over coming into this week. First, we could kind of talk about the daily time frame, and then we'll just mark out brand new charts here on the lower time frame. So thesis for this coming week. So right now you can see that ES is holding up after reclaiming key levels. Currently, we have been consolidating all week. We have news over the weekend, which is important. So we will see how the market opens on Monday morning. What I like to see moving forward for more upside is the hold of your 5560 area. So that's what I mentioned here on ES on the daily time frame. As you can see, this is basically the daily time frame that we have so far. So our key level was our 5600. You can see our previous level of support turned into resistance, turned back into support, and now you can see right with the market with news here as well, we're having a really nice push all the way back up and towards this key area, which is our next logical area here on the higher time frame. So now I'm gonna have to mark out brand new levels. So the key levels that I have marked out was really just the range that we created last week. We had our range low, we had our range high. We talked about this consolidation that we had on the overall markets. If we can now break above, it's going to be your last week's key pivot high. You can see we actually gapped above this area. So we gapped above this area. In the after hours, we end up using this as an immediate retest. It's basically what's called the gap and go. You can see we had a nice push all the way back up and towards really the area that we broke down from. So this was a very key pivot area on the chart, which is your 5773, and you can see huge push higher. Now we actually gravitated up and towards the next general area, which is our 5838. So as you can see right here, this is the next level, and you can see ES already took out that level here in the pre-market, and now we're gonna have to mark out levels all the way back left. So in this case, right? You can mark out this key level, this key level. Now we're gonna have to mark out these daily pivot levels, which is all the way back from March earlier this year, and basically the lows that we actually broke down from. So this is really the general area. You can see the area that we broke down from. So now ES is kind of returning back up and towards the break and retest here on the higher time frame. So that's what we have on the ES. Now we can just mark out old daily highs, right? This is another daily high all the way back from March the 6th. You can also mark out kind of this key pivot low if you'd like as well. You can actually just mark out this level. And now we can go back onto the lower time frame. So coming into this morning here for the ES, we're actually quite far away from its previous day high. So now we're just going to base it all on intraday price action. So we can't use last week's highs. We can't even use their pre-market lows. We're really just basing it off of now. It's going to be your intraday price action and key levels. So the key levels I have coming into today, number one, I have a couple key levels. It's just going to be your 5861 higher time frame pivot point. We also have this daily high, which is important, which is your 5837. And you can see so far the couple reactions around this general area. If we're now looking for more upside, it's going to be very difficult, right? It's going to be very hard, at least right off the bat, looking for more upside, just because we're up around 3% on the overall market. So if you do want to buy dips, right, that's going to be what you're going to be looking for. You much rather buy dips for continuation higher than wait for, right, the break and retest above. Now it's going to be your pre-market high above this 5861 for continuation towards the high. So we'll just actually let price action develop a little bit more here. We'll go into the SPY chart and the Qs as well to see if we have any other key levels to go off of, and then kind of look at some of the tech names to kind of develop our game plan coming into market open. As for SPY, similar thing. If I kind of zoom out here, key levels for the SPY, you can see really nice bounce so far on the overall markets. Our key level here was our tariff news high, which we got above, end up using this as a retest for a continuation back towards the highs. Now I can see so far with this market gap up, we're now pushing back above a lot of key areas. So this key high, which is our 576, now we're really just coming back up into this general area that we broke down from, which, as you can see, exactly where we're at currently, our 580 here in the pre-market. So our 580 is basically the area that we broke down from. Once we broke underneath this level, you can see really nice push towards the downside, and that's when we originally had our push lower. So now you can see markets are gapping right back up and towards this general area. So if you go back onto the daily chart, turn back on the levels now, we can start drawing out key levels. So in this case, what we have now marked out is going to be this key pivot high back from the 26th, which is our 576. We also have marked out now, it's going to be this 583. And now we can also mark out a couple other levels. We can mark out this body if we'd like. We can mark out this key pivot high, 578. We can mark out this body. Now let's just go on to the lower time frames here. So we're on the 15-minute time frame. So as you can see, basically similar thing, kind of this gap in the pre-market, just really big push towards the upside here. We're well far away from its last week's highs. We're far away from its previous day highs. So coming to market open, we're going to have to base it more on key levels based off the higher time frames and intraday price action. So for SPY, the key levels today really is just going to be this pre-market high that I have drawn out, your 583.11. And then really we're just going to wait for kind of the first really 15 minutes to develop here and just base it off of intraday price action. So we'll have our 585, we have this 578, and then we also have this 581.33 here. So really, we're just going to be looking for kind of major dips on the overall markets. SPY really had this huge push higher. So let's see if that really first dip can get bought up for this continued push higher. A lot of times, whenever you have this big gap up over the weekend, right, you're up about 3% here for the SPY and the Qs. What you want to be looking for is to see if that first dip gets bought up. Right, we can look for that first dip down in towards your 578 on the SPY. I'll take a look at the QQQ here in a second. But generally speaking, the markets usually just don't have a V-shaped recovery back towards the downside on day number one. Whenever you have a potential pullback in the overall market, or if you have a reversal, usually it just doesn't go straight down after having this huge gap up over the weekend. If you do have a reversal, it's usually later into the week. So we can expect that first dip to get bought up, and that's basically what we're going to be looking for coming into market open. Let's go into the NQ. Let's go on to the daily time frame. thesis for this coming week. Right now, you can see that we're basing above the 19,500 level on the NQ. This is the pivot point on the higher time frames. What I like to see moving forward is a reaction that we have off of this level. As long as we maintain above this level, I like to see a move back up and towards your 2100, sorry, your 21,200. So for the NQ, I mentioned on the higher time frames, if we can maintain above, really now it's going to be this 19,000. So this is your key pivot high. I mentioned we could see a move back all the way up and towards your 21,200. So this is really the area that we broke down from here on the NQ chart. So you can see multiple levels of support. Once we broke underneath, we end up having this nice push lower. So eventually we're going to come back up and towards this general area. You can see almost in one day, we're back up and towards this 2100. So if I go back onto the drawings, enable the drawings here for the NQ chart. Now we're above this key pivot daily high, which is our basically our lower high structure point. You can see when these lower highs were being built, right? Once price broke back above, you can see basically liquidity is just being built up, and we end up taking out a couple key highs, right? This high, and we're just going to run all the way back up and towards this area, which is our 21,200 here for the NQ. So if I go back onto the lower time frames now, I'm going to mark out this daily high. I'm also going to mark out this daily high all the way back from the 5th, which is your 28.58. I can mark out a couple more daily highs. Basically, this kind of coincides with this January 13th lows. And I can mark out this one here as well, which is going to be this March 4th high, which basically coincides with these lows all the way back from earlier into the year. So for the NQ, so coming into today, similar thing. We're well above now your previous week's highs. We're well above your previous day highs here as well. So we're really going to have to base it off of intraday price action, higher time frame point of interest, which now is going to be this 29.37. And then we're also going to have this 28.53. So coming into this morning, this looks fairly similar to the ES key levels. We really like to see for more long side now. We're going to be looking for a potential kind of dip down in towards your 28.53. It's basically a higher time frame. It's also a pre-market level here as well. Or we like to see now it's just going to be the reclaim of your 29.37 pivot high, and then for more continued pushback towards the upside. Let's go into the Qs here and mark out some levels as well. I think at least coming into this morning, we're going to have to base it off of the lower time frames. We're going to have to use higher time frame key levels and then go look on the lower time frames for potential confirmation. So for the QQQ, similar thing. If you look at this daily chart, right, the Qs is very much bullish. Once we reclaimed your 469 a few weeks ago above this tariff news highs, you can see end up using this as support for this continued push higher. And now you can see we're right back in towards, it's basically your 510 here for the QQQ. So if I turn back on the drawings, now the key levels I have marked out for the QQQ is just going to be these old daily highs. So we can go back over here, draw out these brand new levels. And now we can go back onto the lower time frame. So for the QQQ coming into this morning, the key levels I have marked out really is your 512 and your 502, fairly far apart. So I'm going to have to mark out more levels in this case. I'll mark out this daily high. I'll just mark out your 508. So for the Qs coming into this morning, the key levels I'm going to have marked out, your 502. We can also have marked out your 508 and then your 512 here as well. So coming into today, preferably you want to be looking for dips on this name. As I mentioned, you want to be looking for dips and basically reclaims. That's the best way to trade whenever price has a push higher. You don't really want to be looking for this opening drive right off the bat. You want to look for a dip and rip for this continued pushback towards the high. So for the QQQ, the key levels will be your 502.97. We also have your 508 here as well. Really, we're going to be looking for the dip and rip, which is the best case scenario, or you're going to be looking for the break above, kind of this opening play. This one's going to be a little bit harder to trade, which is number 2. But number 1, if we have a dip in towards a key area, in this case for the QQQ, it's just going to be kind of this key pivot high, which is your 28.53. We'll talk about the more exact game plan coming to market open here in a second. We're just going to mark out basically key levels and let price action develop here just for now. Okay, let's go on to the Tesla chart. So thesis for Tesla, nice base on Tesla above the 270. As you can see, we're finally breaking back towards the upside above 290 now. What I like to see moving forward in this name is a push back and a hold back above 300. We can see a quick move on this name back towards 320 if we can hold key levels. So I mentioned on Tesla over the weekend and kind of last week as well. If we can hold now above 300 and it's basically 290 key level, there's room all the way back up and towards 320 fairly quickly, because you can see, right, this is basically the area that we dropped down from. So there's not too much volume here. So if we can break back above, as I mentioned, we basically went from consolidation, right, downtrend, consolidation, and now we like to see, right, Tesla move back up and towards the uptrend. So now we're breaking back above your 298. We're basically breaking back 300 as well, and now we're just right back into the area that we dropped from, which is now your 320. So if you go into the higher time frames, now the key levels that we can have marked out, you can see this is the area that we broke down from, or 320, 324. This is the area which we can have marked out. Now we can go back onto the lower time frame. So really coming to this morning on Tesla, really this 324 is really a super key area. There's not too much room for upside. We're up about 8% here as well. So coming to market open, there's a good possibility that we kind of just push up in towards this 324 and then we kind of just consolidate in this general area. So for Tesla, pretty big gap. As you can see, we're above your previous day highs, also your last week's highs as well. We end up having a nice base above your 294 previous resistance, basically turned into support here on Friday. And then of course, with the gap up over the weekend, now we're gapping up right in towards basically this 320 and this 324. So coming into this morning, the only key levels I'll have marked out is just going to be your pre-market highs, and this higher time frame point of interest being that 324. I'm not too interested in trading Tesla long today because you're going to be trading right up and towards this 324. Maybe if it consolidates or pulls back, then you could be looking for kind of this low risk, right, off kind of your pre-market lows, higher time frame levels for this push up in towards this 324. What you don't want to be doing is trading long right off the bat, right in towards your 324. So you much rather wait for a dip, which in this case, it doesn't seem like the market's going to dip. It's probably just going to have that opening push right off the bat. So for Tesla, really, those are my key levels, 324. You can also mark out this key pivot low here, which is going to be this 320. Potentially, as I mentioned, you can use this as a dip for a push up and towards 324. There's not too much room here, but this is also an area that you like to see hold your 320, which also is a key psych, which lines up with a couple touches here in the pre-market as well. So that's what I have for Tesla. Let's go on to a few other tickers. NVIDIA, thesis for this coming week. NVIDIA currently right at a very key pivot point in the markets. This is the low all the way from January earlier this year. What I like to see is a reaction off of this level moving forward. If we can hold back above your 118.50, we can see a move back towards the upside. So for NVIDIA, if we go into the daily time frame, right, higher time frame, remove a couple of drawings here as well. Really, this is the area that we broke down from. As you can see, this is all the way, this is your gap down from basically earlier of this year when we had that news, basically that black swan event over the weekend. You can see this is a key point of interest that we had, right? Multiple touches around this general area. Now NVIDIA trying to hold back above your 116. Let's see if we can push back up and towards. Now it's going to be this 120. So if I put the drawings back on here on NVIDIA, the next levels I have marked out is just going to be this key pivot high, which is going to be this 122.86. We can also mark out just this key pivot high if we like as well, which is going to be your 121.32. So go back onto lower time frames, coming to market open, key levels for NVIDIA. As you can see, we're well above your previous week's highs. We're well above your previous day highs here as well. What we're going to keep an eye out for is your 121.32. We can also keep an eye out on this 122.86. So far, kind of just consolidating this general area. Potentially, you could be looking for a bounce play right off the bat for NVIDIA for a push up in towards this 122, right? This really, for me, it's very hard. Number two, right, this scenario, which is going to be the break above, because we already have such a big gap up. Whenever you have a big gap up, as I mentioned earlier, you want to be looking for a dip instead of looking for, right, the opening drive Looking for this long position above your 122, above your pre-market highs is going to be very difficult. So you much rather try and anticipate the first dip getting bought up for a push up and towards your higher time frames on basically any sort of name that we do have. So that's what I have for Nvidia coming to market open. Let's go into Apple. Right now, you can see that Apple is lagging versus the overall markets. After earnings, this is pushed back down towards the lows. What I like to see is a reaction off 208, since that is the area that we broke down from. So for Apple, if you go into the higher time frames, really this one's lagging the overall markets. Key levels that I mentioned was basically this level, your 208. This is your high. This is also your earnings high here as well. Now you can see we're having this nice bounce back towards the upside here with the overall markets. Now the key levels that I can have marked out is just going to be this 214. So for Apple, you can see multiple touches here, touch here. This is basically your earnings touch here as well. And you can see another touch in the pre-market. Now that's your 213. So for Apple, this one, lagging behind versus the overall markets. If Apple can now get above your 213, 214, right, this can look good for this continued push back towards the high. So for this one, right, what would you like to see on Apple? Right, you can see you already have a nice reaction here off 213. You like to see consolidation and then push up in towards that 214, which is your higher time frame point of interest, your earnings highs plus that gap up that we had earlier as well. Another scenario for this one can be now the break above your 214 for this push higher here as well. So for Apple, I don't mind Apple looking for the potential break above your 213 and hold, just because this one we're not having a crazy gap up above key levels. We're gapping up right into a key level of resistance. So for this name, what you would like to see is consolidation. This is preferably the best trading opportunity is once it reclaims your 210, you can see it push up in towards your 213. As for if Apple pushes up in towards your 214 right off the bat, you do have to be a little bit cautious, because if it breaks above your 214, you can see the base and continuation, or you could see a potential kind of sharp reversal off this 214 for this pushback towards the downside. So for Apple, we'll keep an eye out on this 214. We can actually mark out a few other levels here as well. Let me actually just get some levels marked out. The levels I'm going to have marked out is just going to be this high in this case, which is a level I got rid of, but we can draw this back since it's going to be valid now. I have your 210. So for Apple, basically this 209, 210, multiple touches. If Apple does want to come back towards this general area, you can be looking for the first step for a pushback towards the upside. All right, let's go on to AMD. Thesis for AMD. AMD starting to find a bottom here. We had a nice bounce off the bottom, being that 80 key psych. Once we reclaim 96, you can see we had a nice pushback towards the upside. What I would like to see is AMD start moving back towards the daily gap and that 116 level. So for AMD, if we're looking at this on the daily time frame, reclaim key levels being that 96, you can see buyers are starting to step in here above this tariff news highs. Now we have this daily gap all the way back up towards your 108, which we actually just filled, and this higher time frame point of interest, which is going to be this 116 here. So for AMD key levels, we can have marked out daily gap. We can drag this over. Now we can go into lower time frames, and now we can also mark out this daily high, which is going to be back up and towards your 116. So for AMD, as you can see, right, key levels, your 108 daily gap that we have marked out. Now, what I would like to see is the base above your 109. So basically, right, nice push above your daily gap. What I like to see is all dips get bought up inside this daily gap for this push back up and towards your pre-market high here and above. So those are the levels I have marked out for AMD. Now we can also mark out your pre-market high here as well. Now let's go back onto the other charts that we do have. Meta here. Meta, so thesis for this coming week, right now you can see that Meta reclaimed above the tariff news highs. Now that we're above this level, what I like to see is a hold of your 584 for a pushback towards the upside. So that's what I have for Meta. If we're looking at this on the daily time frame, a lot of these ones reclaim key areas. So that's why you can see we're having a nice push, right? The technicals are now basically aligned with news as well. So that's why we're having a lot of nice pushes higher. Meta basically reclaimed this super key area, 588. Now the next key levels are going to be really 630. So as you can see right here, turn back on the drawings, key levels we could have marked out is going to be this 630. We can drag this over. And then we could also drag out this one here as well. So your 634. So for Meta coming into this morning, you can see we already have a couple touches here in the pre-market above your 626, your 634. For Meta, this one kind of already hit your main objective. You'd like to see another push coming to market open, but that's basically your higher time frame point of interest here for Meta. That's what you have. So your actually, let me just get this right, 633.82. So coming to this morning for Meta, a lot of these ones are going to be a lot harder to trade, especially if they don't dip coming to market open, just because they have a big gap up. So you have to see a dip in the actual intraday pre-market. So, in the actual intraday, once 9:30 happens in the actual market hours, you like to see a dip and rip happen for a push higher. If the markets just rip higher right off the bat, this is something you don't want to be looking for, just because we're going to be well overextended, right? We're already overextended on a lot of these names, but if we can dip on the lower time frames, we could be looking for that push up in towards your pre-market highs. So that's what I have for Meta. Now let's go into Amazon. Right now, you can see Amazon is coming up in towards the tariff news highs. What I like to see moving forward for more upside is the hold of your 193 for continuation back higher. So for Amazon, a lot of these ones fairly similar, right? Key levels that we have marked out, right? Your tariff news highs. Once we can break back above this level, right, we can see a push back towards the upside. You can see for Amazon, we're actually up really nicely here in the pre-market. Key levels that we have marked out is now going to be this high, which is your 206. And we can also mark out these highs all the way back here, which is going to be this 209. So for Amazon, a really nice push higher above your 194, back up and towards your 206. Now we can go into lower time frames. So far, Amazon pushing up and towards this 209 here in the pre-market. So for this name, right, and a lot of these ones as well, you like to see a dip coming to market open. If we just push higher, right, be cautious just because it's going to be overextended after a long weekend. IV is going to be fairly high as well. So we like to see an IV flush if we're going to be looking for a trade back towards the upside. So those are all the levels I at least have marked out on some of these tech names. I'll kind of go over my game plan here in a second. If you guys do have any charts you'd like me to go over, most likely probably won't do too much going over too many names today, just because I have to go over the game plan markout, kind of refine my game plan markout, the levels that we do have. Let me just grab some water here. All right, what's good, everyone? What's up? Good morning. Yeah, if you guys do have any charts, you guys can leave them in the chat. I do see there's quite a few new people here. Welcome to the stream, everyone. Also, if you guys haven't joined already, you can join that free watch list in the description. Also, I'd appreciate if you guys drop me a like and sub. We're actually almost at 100K, which is awesome. So appreciate if you guys could do that. It takes a few seconds. Let me look at the chart. What's up? Good morning. Why is the date on your chart off? No, the date's the same. It just depends on what time zone you're in. Where do you got all that info? This was just my weekly outlook. I think you're talking about the news, everything else. I just do this every week, so I post it in the watch list as well. So you can find this below, but just key economic events, earnings, and just other things as well. Good morning, gold analysis. Yeah, all right, I'll take a look at that all here in a second. So let me kind of refine some of my levels here for the overall markets, and then I will go over some tickers. So at least for the SPY and Qs, the exact same thing is still going to be this 508. It seems like the markets are pushing higher. So as I mentioned earlier, this is very bullish for the overall market, but it's just going to be hard because now we have a big gap up. So at least anything positioned intraday is going to be pretty difficult, right? Right now, swings, long terms, right? Really nice pushes higher. At least for intraday, it's going to make it a little bit more trickier within the first. Really, I think this session today is going to be fairly difficult, because you're primarily going to be looking for just scalps, right? After this big gap up, you're not looking for, right, another like 5 points here, and another couple percent here for the SPY, just because we're already gapping up 3%. Right, coming to market open, any sort of trading opportunity is mainly just going to be based off of the lower time frames, and you're just going to base it off of intraday price action and just like kind of the reaction off these key levels as well. So for the SPY, it seems like it's pushing higher, so not really too much to talk about this one. By the time I mention a game plan, it's probably going to be different from market open. So most likely, if SPY opens up anywhere close to this basically this 583, if it just pushes higher right off the bat, it's best to just wait for the first 30 minutes, because if you're trading options, right, a lot of people are going to be selling into this first morning push. The IV is going to be now super elevated as well, just because we have this big gap up. So you might as well wait for the first 15 to 30 minutes. If it consolidates, which potentially it could, after that morning push, right, you just want to be patient, because now, right, the first dip is so far getting bought up here in the pre-market. If we're looking at the Qs, similar thing, right? This is a scenario where, right, maybe it's best to trade in the pre-market with futures, but when coming into market open, it's most likely going to be at the high, so you want to be a little bit cautious. As for Tesla, this one, it's going to gravitate up and towards that 324. So not too much to talk about on this one. This is just the area that we broke down from. So you can see we're just going to gravitate back up and towards this general area and actually make it a smaller level. But it's our 324 coming to market open here. This is a really good area, kind of this morning push. If you're in Tesla, kind of calls to sell on this morning pop up and towards 325 and above here as well. Let's look at a couple other names. NVIDIA's consolidating. So this is a name that we could take a look at coming to market open if it does want to consolidate for kind of that first dip. This one does have room up and towards, now it's going to be your 122 and above. So for NVIDIA, what we can be looking for is now just going to be your pre-market low bound. So for this name, if you go into lower time frames, I would consider this basically your 121. Technically not your pre-market lows, but I would consider this, right? You have multiple touches here. You have your key level being that 121. I like to see NVIDIA potential kind of dip off your 121 for this push back up and towards this 122 here and above. So we can take a look at that on NVIDIA. As for the rest of the names, Apple, I like this dip down in towards that 110 if we can get it. Let's take a look at Microsoft and Google here. Microsoft, nice gap up here as well. This one looking really solid. As I mentioned, this one's most likely now just going to push back up and towards all-time highs. So we filled that daily gap last week. The next logical levels is going to be this 448. It's going to be this 456, and this push back up and towards all-time highs. So for Microsoft, this one just constantly building up these higher lows, as you can see. Now we're having a gap up on the overall market right in towards our 447. We're kind of far away from your previous week's highs. Now you're really just going to have marked out your pre-market highs, pre-market lows. And really, these are the key levels that you're going to base Microsoft off of, right? If you can bounce off your pre-market lows, you can see a potential push higher. Towards the upside, if we reject off your pre-market highs, we can kind of just consolidate in this general area. If we break underneath your pre-market lows, potential fade back down in towards your previous week's highs, right? You're just going to all base it off of intraday price action here. As for Google, this one I actually like quite a bit. It's not like day trading wise, but long term, this one, Google now reclaiming this 157. So really, this is the area that we dropped from last week. This to me is fairly clear, right? Big news drop towards the downside. You can see a couple touches here. Now we're using this as a potential flip, being that 157 for Google. Really, your best area is going to be your previous. It's going to be your Thursday's highs. So now you like to see Google kind of just maintain and push back towards the upside. This one, really, this is your best area. It's kind of far away. It's in between your pre-market levels now. So might be a little bit of a harder setup, but really nice on the higher time frames for kind of this pushback towards the upside here on Google. And then for Netflix, this one's actually showing some weakness, at least intraday, higher time frames. This is one of the most bullish tickers, but so far with this big gap up, Netflix is actually just pushing back down in towards the range that we created from last week. Okay, let me see. Let me go over some names that we do have. Palantir. So for Palantir, this one, as I mentioned, this one has room all the way back up and towards all-time high. So for Palantir, we can actually be looking for potential trading opportunity above. Now it's going to be your last week's pivot point. So we have your Thursday. We have a couple key levels marked out here. So we can have this marked out, which is now just going to be your Thursday's highs here. So for Palantir, we have room up and towards your all-time highs, being your 125 and above. Now we can also mark out it's going to be your Thursday's highs. So as long as you maintain above your Thursday's highs being your 120, you like to see this push back up and towards your pre-market highs and your all-time highs being this 125 here. So we can mark out your 120. We can also mark out here, it's going to be your pre-market high on Palantir. As for ARM, this one gapping, we had earnings. This one's gapping right in towards your earnings highs. So if you do want to see any sort of continuation on this name, it's going to have to be above this 124. Above this 124, we can see this push towards the upside. If we reject off this 124, we're just going to come right back down in towards now, reject off your earnings high here, and then push potentially back down in towards your Thursday's highs for ARM. As for IWM, this one, like with the overall markets, reclaiming a couple key levels, right? The levels last week for ARM was basically this tariff news high actually all the way back here in this 191 and this area that we broke down from, which is your 198. For IWM, now we're gravitating above a couple key areas, right? 209, right? Pretty big gap up here on IWM. And then next level is going to be all the way back up and towards your 215. So you can have that marked out for IWM. Now you just like to see the hold of your 209 for this continued push back towards the upside here on the overall markets. SoFi looks good. This one looks really good along with a bunch of other tickers as well. SoFi, it's going to have to get back above this news candle high, which is also your earnings. If we do want to see any sort of continual push higher, right, you can see higher lows are being built. Now we have to see the reclaim above this key level, which is now going to be this earnings candle high. So for SoFi, key levels that you can have marked out is now just going to be this 1450. This one most likely now is just going to kind of slowly kind of push back up in towards this 1450 earnings high here on SoFi. Okay, let me see. Let me kind of scroll down here, see if there's any questions. Wonders for the trading. Do you have a paid service to check your trades, live trades? Yes, it'll help me recover my debt. Yeah, if you come in with the mindset of trying to make, it's going to be difficult, right? Regardless of any room that you're in, if it's the thought process is making money back and you're trying to copy signals, it's not going to work out, right? That's just kind of the reality of it, is that you can have, whenever the markets are hot, right, you can make money, but just having the conviction yourself, it's not long-term sustainable. Let me put it that way. Earnings today, yes, opening range at 9. I have a question. Can I use the 9 EMA? Yeah, you can use the 9 EMA on the 5-minute or the 1-minute time frame. What time frame do you use for entry on the dip and? We can go on the lower time frames in this case, so we can be on the 1 and 5 minute. You can look for that first dip here on the 5-minute time frame, or you could be looking at the 1-minute time frame. Either way, you're going to be looking at this 1-minute candle. So once this 1-minute candle forms, right, you can be looking for, right, the reclaim of your opening candle range low. This can be on the 1-minute or the 5-minute for this continued push higher. So if the first candle is bearish, right, let's say we push lower, then we could be looking for the reclaim once it gets back above that opening range candle for this continued push higher. So we can do this on the 1-minute or the 5-minute time frame. When the market gaps up so much, will you be looking for a short position? I definitely won't be looking for a short position on day number 1. I personally trade with the trend, so this is not something I'd be looking for at least day number 1. Maybe a short day number 2 after this gap up, maybe later into the week, but not on day number 1, because usually that first dip gets bought up, especially on a Monday after big bullish news. Usually that first dip gets bought up and we continue higher. If we do have a reversal, it's going to most likely continue higher. And then maybe a Tuesday or Wednesday, right, we start dropping, right? There should be no reason why we don't move higher, or put it this way. We're not going to drop today. We could potentially drop tomorrow, or maybe later into the week, just because we have some red folder news events. But today, no red folder news. We just had bullish news over the weekend. The first step's going to get bought up. So if you do short, don't short today and look to short maybe tomorrow or on Wednesday. What about Robinhood? I personally use interactive brokers. Can I ask your box strategy? Do you start every Monday? Yeah, you can start every Monday, or you can start whenever we have news. So in this case, we can be using your Monday's price action, right? If we're going to draw your Monday's highs and lows today, the actual high and low hasn't even been developed. I did Amazon long Friday, 938 previous day high. Yeah, that one looks really good. Let me see. Futures question, I answered that one. Push higher, agree. A lot of oversold potential, profit taking later into this week. Market's still very news driven. Thanks for helping me my charting immensely. Glad it's helping. What would a swing entry be looking like for Google? It would be down in towards, right, kind of your 157, right? Your 157 is going to be this best area. You can see so far in the pre-market, right? It's basically, right, mean reversion. This is not something I personally would look to swing options, right? Google is just like a long-term kind of bounce, right? Because we had bad news last week. So there's a lot of better names to trade, but Google's like trading the most relatively weak name on a fairly bullish market. Okay, let me see. It's almost 8:40 here. So yeah, let me go over a couple more names. I'm actually gonna go over my game plan just because not too much time left, and there's a lot of charts, not too much time. But basically, coming into this morning, my game plan at least is going to be waiting for that first dip. So regardless, either way, if you're trading, let's say options, right, after this big pop higher overnight, right, you're going to have to wait for that first dip regardless, because the IV is just going to be so high over the weekend, and most likely in that first push everyone's going to be looking to take profits regardless. So for the SPY and Qs, I'm only interested for a potential opening play if, let's say, SPY or Qs kind of has a dip right off the bat. A dip right off the bat means the first 5 minutes or the first 1 minute candle shows weakness, and we have a little bit of a dip where we can be looking to buy for this continued push back up in towards, now it's going to be this pre-market highs and above. If the market moves higher right off the bat, then I'm not interested in looking to chase price above your pre-market highs, at least within the first kind of 15 to 30 minutes, just because, right, we're already overextended, right? We're up 4%. So at least for the SPY and Qs, we're just going to be waiting. It's mainly based off of intraday price action. So the levels that I have drawn out are good, but we're going to be waiting primarily based off of, right, your opening ranges in this case, because we're far away from your previous day highs, which is levels we like to use, your last week's highs. So in this case, we have to use levels that are a couple months ago. So we're going to be waiting for, right, these levels, a reaction around these key levels, along with intraday price action here as well. At least for the names I'm looking for coming into market open for a potential move higher. Number one is going to be Tesla. I do like Tesla for a move up and towards this 324. What I'll be looking for is this dip down and towards 320. If you can get this is going to be a super solid trading opportunity for a push higher. If Tesla just pushes higher right off the bat, then this is going to be a no trade. So if you can dip down and towards your 320, this is going to be super solid for a potential day trade up and towards that 324. For NVIDIA, we can also keep an eye out on video as well. It's just going to be the bounce off the low. So we can potentially be looking for the bounce off 121.40s for this push back up and towards this pre-market high. So we'll keep an eye out on NVIDIA as well. As for Apple, the dip level is going to be down and towards this 210. If it can dip down and towards your 210, this is going to be super solid. If we just push higher right in towards this 314, right, as I mentioned, right, we don't want to be looking for a trade. So a lot of these ones, if you can dip down and towards key areas, that's great. Let's look at a few other tickers that we do have. Really, so far, just like Tesla, NVIDIA, Apple looks good here as well. Amazon, this one looks good on the higher time frames, basically gapping above. Now it's going to be this 206. So for Amazon, if you can actually come back down, the level for me is going to be this 206. It's a little bit of a steeper pullback, but if you can dip down and towards your 206 potentially, this would be looking good for this pushback up and towards your 210. So we'll keep an eye out kind of this pre-market level here, this 206 key level as well. For AMD, I also like AMD. This is basically your higher time frame gap. So we have this daily gap that we actually just filled here, which is back up and towards this 108. So for AMD, the key level, if we can bounce off this 108, right, dip, can get bought up for this continued push back up and towards your pre-market highs here and above. So that's what I have for AMD. And then the rest of the names, it seems like they're just basically inside these pre-market ranges. So coming to this morning, we're just going to be a little bit more selective. If the market can dip, we can be looking for the dip and riff. If it pushes higher, no trade. So Tesla, going to be my main watch off 320. NVIDIA, I like 121 bounce off this one. And then Apple, I like the bounce off of your 210. So that is what I have for the markets. Palantir, maybe later into the session. In the next couple of days, Palantir is going to set up fairly nicely if it can come back and retest this 120.40. Okay, let's see. 943. Let me I see a couple of tickers. Let me look at some major names, right? Bitcoin. I'll take a look at Bitcoin and gold. So for Bitcoin, this one, we talked about this one last week. This one has a potential move all the way back up towards your all-time highs once we reclaimed a couple key areas. I think Ethereum is finally bouncing. Right, this one finally bouncing now, but this one you like to see now the hold of really it's going to be this 100,000 key psych for this push up in towards 109. If I take a look at gold, this one consolidating a little bit more now, higher time frames, the key levels that we had marked out. Once we actually broke back underneath, I mentioned, right, if you can hold this level, we can push back towards the highs. If we break back underneath, potential retest. You can actually see in this case, gold broke back underneath. Our key levels are 3360. Actually use this as a retest towards the downside, and now we're actually right back down in towards the low of the range, being that 3240. So yeah, that is going to be it for me today. Sorry if I couldn't go over any of your tickers. There's just too much to go over with this gap up today. As I mentioned, if you guys haven't joined the free watch list, that one's in the description below. I just kind of do a mini recap of what I'm looking for, like a quick couple minute videos instead of, if you don't want to watch the whole session, right, you can watch kind of that quick video just to understand my thesis coming to market open. I'm personally going to call it a day. If you guys did enjoy that, I appreciate if you guys drop me a like and sub, and I'll see you guys all tomorrow morning. All right, take care, everyone.